Here's how to recharge the AC on one of these Chevy trucks, quick and easy. Let's check it out, guys. Trust me, I'm a mechanic. Gotta be careful when you're working on these HVAC systems, they're under a lot of pressure. So this truck has already leaked down to 0 PSI.
So right here, you unscrew the cap and you got a little Schrader valve in there, you know, like a valve core stem on a tire. So this thing will start leaking, you'll lose all the refrigerant out of the line, and then your AC just stops working. And the AC compressor stops coming on because this safety switch right here cuts out. And it cuts out to protect it because there's low refrigerant in here. And then this one, you know, it can leak too. It's got a cap down in there, rubber seal, and that seals this off right here. You know, it's just a little ball in there, a little plastic ball, and it seals up. You can unscrew it and get you a new one. It's got an O-ring on there, and it's, you know, not 20 years old.
So if any of these ports leak, this is what the gauges are gonna read. So I got these gauges hooked up now, and let's see what it's reading. Nothing, completely empty. So yeah, we're gonna have to fill it up after we pull the vacuum.
All right, so on these trucks, we have the low pressure port up here. So we use this port for pulling a vacuum and recharging it. Then we have the high pressure port right here. We never use this for recharging it. It's just to check the condition of the compressor to make sure that it's running properly. There's a tube right in here that makes it go from high pressure to low pressure. All right, I got it hooked up here. I got the ports all the way open. Let's vacuum it down and see if there's any leaks. It's going down. All right, I'm gonna close them off, shut off the vacuum pump, and let it sit for like, 30 minutes or something and see if this needle moves at all. If it doesn't move, we're good to charge. All right, so it was holding a vacuum, for 30 minutes, so it's good. I'm vacuuming it down right now for like 30, 45 minutes. The little pump's doing work.
So I usually get in there with some leak detector, put it in there in the system while I got it apart. That way if we got leaks in the future, we can get in there with a UV flashlight and find them easy.
I got my AC gauges hooked up, and this thing had a leak, so I pretty much fixed it at this point, but I want to make sure in the future that it's not going to leak. And if it does, we'll be able to find it. So what I do is I dump some of this in there so that if it leaks in the future, I can come back with a flashlight at night and find my leak, so I don't have to do this all over again. So you just get a UV flashlight, shine it, all over the engine bay, and you can find the leak easy. So what I do is after I pull a vacuum, I just take the line off, dump some of this in there before I follow it up with my refrigerant.
So the hardest part of recharging the AC systems on these trucks is finding the leaks and then pulling the vacuum because you gotta wait. But finding the leaks can be a challenge, there's a lot of different seals for it to leak from.
All right, so it's done pulling a vacuum. This thing's been going for like 45 minutes now, so it's time to inject this stuff. Inject some of this, get some refrigerant in there, we should be good to go. I did go ahead and get down in here and clean out the air filters while I was at it. They were pretty nasty, so this should be blowing nice and cold.
To put new refrigerant in there, we get R134A. I weigh the bottles before and after and while I'm filling it. That way we know how much refrigerant we put into the system. There's a spec, it's in pounds and ounces. You gotta put the right amount in there for it to work properly.
Got my Super Tech. And of course we can't read it. Pretty sure it takes 1.8 pounds. I looked it up before.
This is messy, but it really helps find leaks in the future. So we charge it with the blue knob, that's the low side, leave the red knob closed, always. Sometimes refrigerant's so low, you gotta use this little wire and jump the switch right here to get the compressor to come on.
And it did, but I don't wanna leave it on like that for long. Let's charge this thing up.
So sometimes you gotta shake the bottle up, turn it upside down, turn it right side up until you see liquid flowing through the gauges into the system. So you got to do a little math here. You got to find out how many ounces and pounds of refrigerant you need. So we got to put in a couple bottles, measure the final bottle to make sure we get just enough refrigerant out of it. All right, so for the pressures, I'm concerned with the low side pressure. I want it to read 50 to 55 PSI, depending on the ambient temperature outside. There's charts you can look up online to see what it needs to read, depending on how hot it is outside. So for the high side pressure, it needs to be around 200, something like that, just to make sure the compressor is working properly.
All right, it's done. The high side's reading good and the low side's reading good. Never open this. Oh yeah, that's blowing ice cold now.
All right, so if you want to know how we got here to begin with, it leaked. It leaked down to zero, all the refrigerant leaked out. So here's the most common leak points and how to fix them. You want to do this before you pull a vacuum, before you recharge the system with refrigerant.
That's the high pressure valve. Then there's the Schrader valve under there. Telltale signs, you know, if there's any oil around here or around here. Like this O2 right here, it's nasty. There's a bunch of leaking oil right there. A bunch of gunk caked on. Down in here, there's an O-ring that goes bad on all of these. It's bad in here too. There's a Schrader valve in there too. You can get a new O-ring, a Schrader valve, and replace all these little valves so it doesn't leak. So this is the pressure switch right here. These things can go bad, but there's an O-ring that seals it up. You can see it kind of looks like it was leaking. See all that gunk around there? I don't know, but it's getting replaced, and that green O-ring is gonna go on there. See what this is looking like. Yep, just as I suspected, the rubber has deteriorated. See how it's bad right there? I'm gonna go ahead and swap that one out in there too. So this pressure switch valve isn't looking too bad, but I didn't suspect that of leaking. This one I suspected of leaking and it was bad. Get all this off of here too.
So it's a good idea while we're doing this to make sure we replace any O-rings, any seals that leak, any of the Schrader valves that leak, and get a new Orifice tube too, because it has a filter on it and it's what really makes the whole system work. You know, it's where the high pressure goes to low pressure because it's got to go through that little orifice in the tube.
So the Orifice tube is in there. Finally dug this Orifice tube out of here. Yeah, it's not too bad, but it's cheap to replace. And then we have our Orifice tube right here. These things are cheap. Let's get this new one in here. That was a pain to dig out. There's a hidden O-ring back up in here too. All right, so I went down to Harbor Freight. They had some O-rings that fit. This one right here and this one right here. So this one right here, this size, fit in here. And then this size, fit in here. All right, here's the new parts right here. So we got the high pressure valve here. We got some new Schrader valves and a cap and, you know, O-ring in there. Let's get that little plastic ball in there. That's where it leaks. Yeah, this new one's looking much better. Found the special tool. Vice grips. Oh yeah, she's old. Get the new one in. You know, some of these hoses can leak too. You know, they're rubber, they can go bad over time. They can leak from the crimps up here or from the hose itself. Then of course under here, you have the AC condenser. It can leak from there, and that is not fun to get to. You gotta pull everything apart, but it has some seals that can leak from there. And then down in there, you have your compressor. You can see the line going into the top of it right here. You got some seals up there that can leak. Then right here where it goes to the firewall, to the evaporator core, it can leak from these seals too. You can swap them out. You know, you can also go through the whole thing and just swap out every seal, every O-ring, everything at once, but I don't recommend it. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it ain't leaking, don't try and fix it because you might cause more problems than it's worth.
So, you know, this was recharging a system that was already low. You know, if you have some refrigerant in there, chances are it's leaking out. You got to fix the leaks. Really, you got to recover that refrigerant and then recharge it. But if it's already leaked down, this is the best way to do it. You're not just supposed to drain the refrigerant out into the atmosphere. You know, you're supposed to suck it out and capture it. But if you try to do this and top off a system that's already low and it's still leaking, you're still gonna have problems in the future. It's just gonna leak right back down to where it was before. Get the right amount, fix any leaks, get in there, pump it up, you know, make sure you check the pressures properly. And then once you do, you'll be good to go. You'll be staying nice and cold, have nice cold AC blowing on you all summer long. Check out the next video. Later.